All right. 6:31 p.m. on November 2nd, 2018. I don't know if this will be posted in time for, I'm bringing the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. I don't know if this will be posted in time to video, but reminding everybody to please vote tomorrow. There's no way you're going to see this in time. Normal announcements. This meeting is being taped by the Board of Selectmen Secretary for accuracy in minutes. It's also being taped and recorded by 1623 Studios for future broadcast. Anybody else who's taping them in the meeting is asked to tell the chair at this time. Item number 2, if everybody could please silence their cell phones at this time, that would be great, so that we don't get surprises in the middle of the meeting. And item number 3, I've forgotten, but it's in the boilerplate, so it'll form up in the minutes. Our normal item 0 is to ask if any members of the audience have items that are not on the agenda that they want to make a comment on before we start into the actual agenda. Anybody out there have anything? Nope. Okay. We will roll right into the agenda, and we're going to elide a couple of things this evening. We're going to shorten things up a little bit because we are down to board members through accident or misfortune, and so we'll have to carry on with at least one of our items past this meeting, but we're going to touch on all of them. First item on the agenda is our second reading of proposed waterway rules and regulations. And what I'm proposing is that we go through them with Brian here tonight, and we won't actually vote them through tonight. There's no pressure for us to approve them right now because we're hitting winter, and I'd rather have both Arthur and Susan have their say if they want any changes or make any comments before we approve them. So with that, Brian, would you enlighten us?
So some of these are just housekeeping. For example, page 4, underlining and italicizing, mooring tackle, and description thereof. We included language other than chain and block because we have different types of moorings now out in mooring fields. On page 5, we've included human-powered vessels. It's a large growing segment, kayaks and paddle boards, and they're relevant in large part to the kayaks and paddle board kayak racks that are now in place here in town. Page 7, more housekeeping. The tender on page 8, the tender wait list, shallow mooring wait list, kayak rack list. I would suggest striking or eliminating the tender wait list. Policy now is that if you get a mooring, you get a tie-up spot for your tender, and those folks who are on the list are waiting for a mooring and have expressed that they would wait for the mooring in order to get their tender spot rather than get it beforehand. Those folks who don't have a boat and want a tie-up at a dinghy dock, they all have it.
So is that a proposal that you're making? That's not actually in.
Right. I'm sorry. I should have put that. I should have put that straight through there. I did not. I highlighted it here to make mention of it.
Okay.
It's on page 8.
Yeah. And has the Harbor Committee already been through that with you?
Yeah. We've gone through all of these potential changes.
Okay.
Page 9, private non-commercial moorings, bottom anchored floats. So, for example, what we see out here would be bow and stern moored floats for private non-commercial held by mooring holders. does require the issuance of a 10A permit, which is the DEP permit issued by harbor masters in the municipality. It's essentially a mooring. Page 14, bow and stern moorings. These are the new moorings, particularly out here behind Town Hall. I flew over with the commercial fishermen and at least one other in area C across from Crocker. It's worked quite successfully, but there was no language in the rules and regulations describing what a bow and stern mooring was or the parameters for having one. Page 16, section G. This pertains entirely to kayak racks. 96 new spots that we've constructed and largely placed up to Tuck's Point. It covers the cost, how you actually qualify for a spot. You have to be a resident. You have to take a safe boating course and pass it successfully. And you must have an if found sticker in there. And it just describes attaching your kayak to the rack and
Or paddle? Paddle is
for
paddle or
kayak.
Okay,
Kayak,
so-
it could be a paddle board, if somebody on the list had a paddle board.
Okay.
And what I've said to folks is if you have a paddle board on the list, you must fit appropriately. You're not going to put a bunch of boards on there that make it impossible for folks to get their kayaks. So it'll be a case by case.
So that's why paddle sport kind of covers
Correct.
all those parts.
Correct. Paddle sport with human-powered vessels. And just a little owner acknowledges on page 17, the owner acknowledges that they store at their own risk and that the town accepts no responsibility for damage. And then page 19 and 20, some changes to the language for fees. The biggest one is that the recommendation for the paddle sport rack go from $75 to $100 for each spot annually. And then the town hall ramp fees, $5 a day, $25 for the season, and then $125 for commercial operators launching vessels that don't already pay a waterway permit.
Who can get a season pass? Anybody?
Anybody, doesn't guarantee parking. And that's, those are the proposed changes.
So you have the Repark Transit as a title,
I'm sorry.
with no specific fee.
Yeah.
Oh, right, I'm sorry. I probably should have left that out at this point because the HAC and the Harbor Department haven't worked up a proposal yet for what the fee should be for those new and coming transient spots.
So when do they need to be approved? Or-
By spring.
Okay, so should we expect a second
Yes.
amendment to this?
It was really, I guess, more semantics,
Mhm.
but just when it talks about spouse, and I think, just there are various places
Mhm.
throughout where it's referred to,
Moorings.
right.
Right.
But there are, I know of many people who are, longtime partners, share a boat, whatever. And I just wonder if there should be any kind of wording that would allow for that.
Right. So, state law says that a mooring, once a mooring holder passes away or surrenders a spot, that it must and may only go, or not must, but may only go to a child. Now, in the case of a couple,
Yep.
in good standing,
Yeah, yeah,
then my policy is to transfer it to them.
okay.
That's how I did it when I was in Kittery. That's how I do it here. We've had some cases, unfortunately, with divorce where one party said, well, I'm taking the mooring, and I've had to say, well, no, you can't.
Right.
Because you weren't the placeholder on the wait list or signed the mooring. Those cases are different. But if it's a life partner and the initial partner passes away, it goes to the other. It's partnership. So, but then it can only go to once that partner is done, it can only go to the surviving child of that couple or the original one. Once that person surrenders it or is done.
So that comes really from the state,
So to the child, yes.
that part.
But,
Okay. All right, thank you for that.
sure.
Okay, and that's the bulk of the changes. Okay. All right, I think I actually covered already the questions that I had. I thought I had one more, but I think you covered it already.
I actually had just a couple of questions that were also pertain to the next thing that you've written. And, well, just sort of all together. And one was, so somebody says, you may not board my vessel, or whatever, and there's an issue, and it refers to the fine, I think it was a 90 something, anyway. 90B. And the fine is only $100. That's it. Is that, is there anything you can do about, that's dictated by the state? Okay.
90B is the state law pertaining to harbor master enforcement. And that's any harbor master. So on a civil harbor master, I had no authority to arrest
Mhm.
at all. I can write a civil citation for which there is a fine. And the fee structure is set up by the state.
Does it change at all with the police?
So it can change for the police because they can write criminal. Now, one of the interesting parts of the 90B law is that if I write a civil citation, it goes before a judge. The judge could deem that to be criminal. All 90B law
Mm-hmm.
can be upcharged
Okay.
to criminal.
Okay. I was just thinking of some of the things that happened this summer and how some of that might be handled.
Absolutely. And certainly if I were to call the police and say, hey, we've got an incident here that's risen above certainly what I would consider a civil issue, I can call upon them and they'll come. They will absolutely come and potentially go to that next level, including arrest if appropriate.
But,
It is good to know.
yeah,
These departments are very supportive.
good, good.
Any other comments or questions on the regs? Comments or questions from anybody out there? All right. Okay, so that, as I said, that will technically count as our second reading, but we will approve it at a later meeting. And hardly any need for you to even sit down, except for its punctuation between item number 1 and item number 2 on the agenda. Item number 2 is an update from the harbor master.
All right, so I guess I would start with our visiting vessel situation. I think most folks are aware that the number of transient boaters coming to Manchester has increased almost every year since 2012. This was the first year where we saw, in a single day, 300 boats anchored at Long Beach. And at the same time, on the same day, 100 boats at Black Beach. Both these numbers are records. Before that, it was 250 and 90. And we had more 200 vessel days at Long Beach this year in a single year than we've ever had before. So I know I've been approached by many folks who said this is too much and we need to address it. We definitely have an enforcement shortfall out there. And even with the addition of a deputy harbor master, there's still not enough bodies on the water to safely patrol all of Manchester, believe it or not, as short as the coastline is. Reed Park, incredibly busy still. I shouldn't say still, it is finally not busy now for the rest of the year, but over the course of the summer, we just saw huge numbers of boats. Now, I will say that once the deputy was operating the boat independently and not in training anymore and was able to patrol in Area 7, it did free up the second boat to do a little bit more, pay a little bit closer attention to what's going on in downtown. But really, without somebody in there to oversee, things happen that make it not safe and more difficult for folks to use that part of the harbor, to tie up and come into downtown and access all of the different offerings the town has.
So with Reed buying, we're out to bid shortly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you very much. So we're out to bid right now on a wall at Morse Pier for the repairs. There's been a lot of interest in that from contractors. Nate from DPW is doing a great job working with the engineering firm and overseeing that piece. And as well, the Reed Park project, the expansion of the docks, bidding goes out November 7th and closes on November 29th. And hopefully we'll get some really good prices for that, like we did for Georgia.
The work to be done when?
So that work, the building of the floats would happen over the winter. Probably order materials before the holidays, or before Christmas, to have on hand, and construction start right after the first of the year. I estimate construction to be 2 to 3 weeks of all the floats, and the driving of pilings, the reconfiguration of the pier, and installation of the ramp sometime in April.
And the wall itself?
The wall itself should be, hopefully that won't start before the latter half of December or the first of the year, so as not to impact the fishermen who will be wrapping up their lobstering season.
All right.
I know I've got something else. Oh, there it is right there. I have, back to the Long Beach thing for just a moment, I have heard from folks who say we need to do something out there. I did say that, but I have also heard from others who would much rather see more enforcement before any limitation of access happen. There's a lot of concern about that in the boating community.
So, when you say limitation of access, you talk about the situation where we might put 20 moorings out there and say you can raft up to 5 off of them, and that's it. So, what would enforcement look like as opposed to limits?
So I would envision potentially a change in the fleet of boats that we have. Potentially take our pump-out boat, which is funded through the Clean Vessel Act, get a new boat. Clean Vessel Act would pay for 75% of all costs associated with pumping out boat. So boat, motor, and trailer, pump out, tank, and then the boat could be additionally outfitted with other things that a harbor patrol boat would need. A tow bar, a fixed firefighting dewatering pump, and potentially even a dive door for retrieving people. That could become the main patrol boat for the harbor department. And then the second boat would become more of an enforcement and heavy weather response boat. I would imagine being staffed largely by the police department.
So let's ask, I'd like to ask it a slightly different way. So, limitation would replace, in theory, replace enforcement, or wouldn't replace it, but it would make it easier because presumably you'd have less of the, type of behavior that's really undesirable. If people want to replace it with, or rather not do more enforcement before the limitation, what are the actual types of behaviors that they really are specifically wanting to have you enforce?
No wake is a big one, particularly for mooring holders anywhere from the yacht club out. I know one mooring holder in Area 6, which is on the left as you're going out the harbor after the yacht club, ended up in the water twice from the bow of his boat because of boat wake. So that's always a big one. Drinking is another of the bigger issues. There is a lot of drinking. Two different personalities for the two different anchorages. Long Beach is more family-oriented, a lot more families there. So less drinking than at Black Beach, or less drinking per boat. But drinking is still an issue over there. So those are the two biggest ones. Safety always comes up, but if we're going to allow people to anchor wherever they want, then you're going to have little islands of boats that other boats have to maneuver through to get to their desired spot to drop in.
Is the Harbor Advisory Committee entertaining having public sessions? to
More than
discuss?
one. Yeah, it's likely that they would want to have more than one.
Well, two concerns that I have with that area, the Long Beach. One is the eelgrass. And by letting people anchor wherever, we're not really doing anything to mitigate the damage. And the other is that the beach over there is a private beach. And when people anchor, they go on private property. And even though it's posted, no trespassing. And with that many boats, when you have 300 boats, you just simply cannot monitor that, and you can't protect the eelgrass. Those are two concerns that I have for that area.
I agree, and I did have a discussion with the Department of Environmental Protection person, actually the person who's doing the diving on our eelgrass moorings to see if they're working or not. And right now, there still isn't the impetus at the state level to put the protections on the eelgrass that are in place at the federal level on coral. You can't anchor in Florida where there's coral anchors against the law. And people come out and write your tickets if you do. So we're not there yet. There are federal rules that do prevent putting moorings, traditional moorings in the eelgrass. But right now, anchors are not. So that would be all we would need to say no more anchoring over there. Both the federal government and the state said they would support moorings over there if it meant no anchoring in eelgrass. But there's really no impetus for most communities to want to do that. We would be the only one. Most harbor departments and towns aren't that interested in that sort of enforcement. Now, as far as the beach goes, there are laws that prevent people from coming within 150 feet of the beach and are allowed to operate a boat. So when I see boats going really close to the beach, I do go in there and advise them, you do need to move out, you can't make it this close. But when I do that, then that leaves the boats to come in. It's, you pick what you're
Right.
going to enforce. So,
Well, and that's again, the volume, the numbers
Right.
thing, and how many
Exactly.
people you have helping you, or if you cut down the numbers in that area.
so that would be something that a dedicated enforcement vessel could do in conjunction with the harbor department. If the boat is there, slowing the folks down, doing that piece of it, the other boat would have the opportunity to go in to speak to people too close to the beach. In its transit in and out of the harbor, going up to Black Beach and into the harbor.
Okay.
The one other piece is that I've had some people suggest that we turn essentially from the half-tide rock to Chubb Island into a no-wake zone. All of the harbor.
Harbors do that. What's your thinking on it?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
As a harbor master, and a person who doesn't like to go fast in boats anyway, I'm at a loss for needing to go fast all the time in a boat. But from an enforcement standpoint, if you reach a critical mass with boat weight in an area and there's property damage and personal injury, then you make it a no-wake zone. Beverly's is pushed out past almost to Hospital Corner. with a no-wake zone.
All right. Should we talk about Magnolia Harbor?
Is that something we can do with that on our own weight?
Sure.
changing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Or did you have something else before we talked about Magnolia Harbor?
Nope, I
All right,
think
let's do
so.
Magnolia Harbor. This is the topic of Gloucester owning the pier, and we have jurisdiction over most of the harbor, including a bunch of moorings. And there's some, the pier was damaged, Magnolia Pier was severely damaged in last winter's storms, needs a complete rebuild, as much as $800,000. And we're going roundabout on the means of paying for that. And we are not beholden to pay for the bulk of that. The town is not responsible for it. But Gloucester is discussing the funding of that pier, since a lot of Magnolia Harbor mooring holders use it. And we have a few different options for how we proceed. And your thoughts?
Well, first of all, about 30% of the mooring holders over there are Manchester residents. The revenue from Magnolia, if every mooring were filled and used every year, would be about $25,000. Truth is that a lot of people just have a mooring over there because they can't get one somewhere else, or it's one that they'll come and use during the day in a transient fashion. This year, because of the closure of the pier, there were even fewer over there.
That's
So-
the way it is right now.
Yeah, right. So the revenue is probably somewhere annually around $15,000 for all the people who use their moorings. If it were the main harbor, then I could compel them to pay or lose the mooring. But there's no wait list over there. There's nobody waiting for those moorings. So if I just say, oh, you lose your mooring if you don't pay this, I don't use it anyway.
Right.
So then we would lose potential revenue the following year. So unless we reach capacity over there in a wait list forms like we have in the main harbor, we're never going to fully realize the revenue potential of navigating the harbor. So it was about 15,000. It is right now 15,000.
So one of the options that was being offered up was the possibility of having Gloucester manage stock.
I would be fine with that, frankly. I know one of their offers was that we contribute $15,000 of revenue towards the pier. That would be all of our revenue, and then we'd still be responsible for going up there to patrol. And obviously, shared service, all the harbor masters in this region respond if needed, if there's, and if we all get. But to be responsible for that harbor, when we are already completely overwhelmed in two of our other areas, I frankly wouldn't be sad.
So if somebody from Gloucester, they do, I guess, 30% of Manchester residents, the rest are Gloucester residents who
Majority.
majority.
Gloucester and Magnolia.
So my only reservation about saying, oh yeah, give it to Gloucester, let them take it over is if I put on my 30-year and 50-year hat and wonder what the picture is going to look like down the road. Is that a resource that we are yielding?
I would say, when I think of my 30 and 50-year hats, up and down to the financial cycles, in 15 or 20 years when we're on where we are right now on a financial high, that's probably going to be a full harbor with a wait list.
Do this like the 3 years at a time, where 3 years we reevaluate and do it where the evaluation comes up like a year in advance, so they're not all of a sudden, nope, you're out. But do you know what I mean? Okay, it's yours for 3 years, but after 2 years we'll assess, and we'll let you know a year in advance if we're going to
With the city of
renew for another
Gloucester,
3. Yeah.
I hadn't even considered that. I don't know how that would work. Certainly, if the idea is to maintain the option of taking the harbor back, that could be a proposal.
Because I think to just flat out say, yep, take it, that would concern me.
What's the maximum number of moorings?
I would say 100 would be a really full harbor. And that would be the most I would want to see over there.
And what's the maximum you've seen? Occupied?
Probably 70.
But part of the problem with that harbor is it's not a comfortable harbor to be on your boat in. You do a lot of rocking. If you're sleeping, you're doing a lot of rocking. So
It's certainly not a harbor where you're going to keep your sleep aboard and spend time. It's a lot like Kittery Point, Pepper Cove, which is the main harbor in Kittery, but exposed to the south, southeast, and southwest, and very rural. But moorings are at a premium. Magnolia is one of the very few places where you can today still get a mooring. But without the pier, so with my 30 to 50-year picture, do I think Gloucester's going to keep paying to maintain that pier?
They're not going to be a big fan of that.
Right. So when we add that into the equation, longer to get to that full harbor, and then there's still the access issue that exists there.
What's the hack say?
What's the access?
What's the hack say, the Harbor Advisory Committee?
They'd be just as happy to see it go to Gloucester.
Okay, so, in what time frame? Obviously, we're not gonna make a decision with a partial review tonight. What kind of time frame are you looking for?
So I'm not looking for any. Gloucester's really the driver here. They're the ones who would like to take it over. So I know that they have a meeting coming up. I was approached by the deputy harbor master looking for numbers of moorings and revenue and that sort of thing to present to the board and to the representative from the city.
So are they anticipating fixing that pier this winter season?
That's right now, yes. There are things that could be done over there that would make it a facility that would be cheaper to maintain in the long term and generate more revenue for them and easier to get out of harm's way in the winter storm. But I don't know if that's the direction to go.
So are any of their operational decisions for repairing that pier going to pivot on Messenger from this board?
For this repair, I don't think so.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time to ponder. Okay. So this one will come back up before this board at some point soon.
I think we're waiting on Gloucester to see whether they do propose taking it over. Going forward. Right now, it's just a discussion.
Okay. All right, anything else on the,
Can't think of anything off the top of my head, Greg. Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
So we'll have more discussion about staffing and patrolling as part of the budget
Budget.
process. So nothing is fine to hold off on that for now.
any other questions from you folks? All righty. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
That's it's nice to have you here. All righty. Well, Parks and Rec, your turn. Item number 3 on our agenda is a Parks and Rec update.
Hi, everybody. Greg and I just figured it would be a good opportunity to give Parks and Rec update end of the summer, going into budget season, all of the above. And you guys need some light stuff at these meetings, you know, like that finance committee meeting. And I'm coming off a recreation high after our big event yesterday. We had our first annual Bark Festival down at Masconomo. We partnered with the community center. We had a few hundred people down there, over 100 dogs in and out. It was a 4-hour thing. We had a little costume contest, but it was just one of those real feel-good days. Everybody was happy. The sun was out. A little windy at first. Couldn't put our papers on the table, but it was just a great day. Great way to kind of end the fall, move into the winter season. And for me, it's also a good step towards doing some more partnerships with the community center and possibly with other groups. So we also had the ice cream truck from the Chelsea Police there yesterday, giving out free ice cream. We have a connection, you know. And we had a canine demonstration by the sheriff's department. So we did have, you know, other things going on throughout the day, and like I said, it was just a nice event. So a good way, good feeling right now. So for our programs in the past years, of course, I've been going over all the numbers during the budget. So the revolving fund income was $316,000 last year, which is about average where we are, right around $300,000 per year. Our expenses are around $241,000, so of course that's the revolving budget, money in, money out. And, whatever's left kind of pays the program coordinator's salary at the end of the year and goes back to the town. So some of those programs that are making the money Our biggest one is the after-school program. So that's our licensed by the state program for after school. We are maxed out 3 out of the 5 days right now. So we are looking at with the state expanding that and getting the numbers to grow. It is based on, the biggest factor is square footage in the school, and then also staffing. So we're trying to boost our staffing, and of course we don't know how long that school's going to be like it is right now. So even if we don't actually get that license, that number hired right now, it's something we know that we can work towards with whatever the new school is. And more kids is more money in the revolving account and more money that gets turned back to the town, without, of course, with maintaining the quality of the program. Because right now, we have a great program. Kids are safe and happy and all that good stuff. At the summer playground, of course, is our biggest program in the summer, and that again went great this year. Our director is leaving. I think I'm going to come here, but we brought it up. Walkus, or Eric Aldrich, who's been the director for the past few years since we lost Don Toll, he is leaving. Moving on to bigger, better things. He's got a great job at the school he teaches at for the summer. So last year we had an assistant director in place, Caitlin Orlando, who's been around for a long time and working for me for 4 or 5 years. So we're hoping to kind of slide her into that role. She's also a teacher, so the summer works great, and she'll be happy to not work weekends. She worked weekends at the beach for me for 3 years, so that we hope to make that a smooth transition. Right now we have winter basketball starting, which is our big winter program. It's the recreational basketball program for grades K through 6. We got the drafts going on, so just when you start to think Parks and Rec is slowing down, there's always something else to keep us going. So that's our big thing coming up, and our ski and snowboard program that we run. We have 50 kids that do that every year, and that is almost sold out now. End of the year recap of at the beach. Another great year. The beach came back, amazingly enough. Who knew?
The beach always comes back.
Exactly. We just never know how long it's going to take, right? So the timing with the late storm just did make it not come back till late, but it did, of course, come back. So we were under new leadership this year. Got a manager in there. His name's Doug Musco. He's from town, or lives in town. He's an adult, a grown-up. It was nice to have a grown-up down there. It made for a much more relaxed summer for me. And he's been a former high school principal and dealt with the staff's age, so he was just great with them. Had that great balance. And we had our assistant director was Whitney Hammond, who has been there for, this is her 5th year there too. So we're lucky, and a lot of returning lifeguards. When I got here, we only had maybe 2 resident lifeguards. Now we only have 1 that's not a resident. So we've really been working to try to get lifeguards and trying to get them to be residents, because we try to give our young residents the jobs when possible. Of course, they have to be trained, properly trained. Actually, going to a kind of a big meeting next week about how to recruit lifeguards, because the whole area is having trouble. So we've done well getting the residents trained in. So the revenue at the beach, it did go up a little to about $182,000. This is just the walk-on, the fees that we collect at the beach. But we also moved the walk-on fee up this year from $5 to $7. So the actual attendance at the beach was down, but the revenue was still up a little. I don't know if it was the smaller beach, it was the weather this summer. It fluctuates every year, so probably is a good thing that we went up those couple bucks, because otherwise we would have been looking at a loss. So good stuff there. One thing the committee, the Park and Rec committee is talking about is maybe moving the season pass. Right now is $17.50. We're talking about maybe moving that up to $20. Mostly just because making change, now that the walk-on fee is $7, go through a lot of ones down there. So, and with the daily walk-on fee going up and the season pass staying the same, we did sell more season passes this past summer than we had the summer before. So, talking about, once we make a decision on that, we'll bring it for approval for that going up. We had a few small issues at the beach this summer, of course. We had the early season hit and run on the building. Somebody drove into the building and left. Luckily, we did catch up with that person. We had the one prank of, we're assuming kids, we're not sure who, putting a lifeguard chair on top of the canteen, which then damaged the roof. I think it damaged the roof coming down, not going up, but either way, that damage to the roof. We made it through that. And, as for issues, the regular weekend parties, fires, trash. Not sure I see an increase. Like I said, it was a new manager, but it's, a lot of trash on weekends. It's night and when it's nice out, and fire debris that's left behind. No accidents or injuries yet, but I'm a little bit concerned about that. The Chowder House had a great year after all the renovations last year. Actually, the renovations were all winter. Did a great job there, but now we're trying to keep it looking nice after the renovation. So we have a part-time custodian down there 5 days a week, and he's treating it like his own, which is nice. So, hopefully we'll get longer use out of it and not destroy it too quickly. The rentals, we're still making a profit down there, brought in about $34,000 in income, and that's like $26,000 in expense, so we're still doing okay there. The custodian was a guy named Bob who's retired, and he worked out great. He stayed on until last week when we got the building closed up. Actually, tomorrow the water goes off, but the place is all closed up now. A few questions I have on Chowder House, which will also roll into the chapel, is not sure how much we want to be promoting it. We have wedding websites asking us if we want to list it on there. I know we have 3 months where we take only resident reservations first, giving them all a chance. Are we ready once January comes to open it up to all these wedding venues? But of course, weddings are going to want to book more than 6 months in advance too, so that means we have to change a lot of policies if that's the direction we want to go in to try to bring in more money. I mean, the non-residents do pay more than twice what the residents pay, so it is a nice income, but of course comes with its own issues. A lot of them too. I do find the non-residents do seem to care a little bit less about what happens there, what they leave, how they leave it, than the residents. Or they just don't get it. They don't understand it. We don't have a full-time person down there. So, but that is something I think we got to think about and look into. And like I said, kind of rolls also into the chapel. What do we, how much do we want to promote that? How much use is too much use for the neighbors? I'm thinking maybe something once a month is a fair goal for that. We had just 4 uses last fiscal year, because also we were just finishing up all that work still. And now trying to get the word back out that it's open. I've done a few showings lately, 2 Sundays ago. One for a wedding, right in the Cape Ann Chamber. Well, Cape Ann Symphony is separate and having some smaller shows of Cape Ann Chamber, and they're interested in using it. So we did schedule one of those for April, and hoping that goes well, and I'm thinking that could be something that would be good. They have all their own people that just be paying for rental. But again, do we want to promote it? Do we want to, we'll be looking for some direction from the selectmen of how we want to do that. Do we want to try to make more money off it? Or are we happy with the way it is?
One observation, and at least from me, and then a kind of question, that you guys speak as well. We spent a lot of money and put a lot of effort into fixing Crowell Chapel up. I mean, a lot of effort to make it available for people to use. So there's a part of me which says, yeah, not necessarily because we want to make money, but yes, we made a point of bringing that building into a position where it could be used, and we wanted to use it. So if from that angle only, the town clearly supported, the residents clearly supported with multiple financial votes, that goal. So my sense is that, yeah, we do want to keep it in play. And then the question I had was, I know with weddings at the Chowder House in the past, we had some issues with wedding parties shall we say, monopolizing the boardwalk there and the rotunda proper. Have we had any issues with that? Has that been sorted out?
I believe it's been sorted out. Didn't get any complaints this summer about it, so I'm not saying there haven't been weddings there, but I do think people that are using it, where we're not allowing people to reserve it, they understand a little bit better what that means.
Yeah.
And anyone who asks us, of course, we make sure they understand. And the people who are down there are respectful. If a wedding party wants 10 minutes or 15 minutes,
Yeah.
it was just when it got to be longer. So I didn't have any complaints this summer. I don't think any complaints have been there to residents.
Several times that we used, yeah, for ceremonies.
Okay. Comments on either of those two?
No, back in school, the after-school program, we never did done. Yeah, I just wonder if we've begun to think in terms of the after-school program and the summer playground program if the school building project passes and work begins. At what point is there an impact on those two very important programs? And any associated expenses that the town's gonna incur because of it?
Beyond thinking about it, I don't know anything more than that. For the after-school program, it's a little bit easier because that's during the school year, so pretty much whatever they do with the kids for school is what we'll do with them for the after-school program. As for summer playground, I don't know. I don't know at this point because I'm sure that's when the bulk of the work will be, and we really want to be getting a lot of work done. So we've talked about using the chowder house for mornings. It doesn't get many rentals during the week, during the morning. So that's possible, We'll figure something out.
Yeah,
We're not going to let it hold back in the school.
I didn't know if there'd been any feedback from the school building committee or.
Not to me. Have you heard anything more specific like that, Greg? I think
No.
during the, during the planning, we had a few ideas, but as things moved along, things got
Mm.
cut.
So I guess I would just like to strongly urge that when the project passes, that this become front and center. Because I feel like there'll be a bigger impact than people are realizing on all of the property over there. And I think that probably feathers all the way out to the field and the tennis court. And that's probably sooner than we kind of in our heads realize. I think.
It's going to come up quick. That's about all I have for updates. Although, just on a side note, we have some of the CPA requests in there for preliminary requests, so we've asked some more picnic tables at Tux Point. We rotate kind of old ones out, bring in new ones. New bleachers at Sweeney Park. All the bleachers down there are not only old and decrepit, they're also out of code. They go too high to not have railings and back on them. And we're talking about possibly repurposing the skate park with pickleball courts. So that is also in as a preliminary CPA request. And then at Singing Beach, just some money for building preservation, bike rack, and we're talking about possibly cameras at the beach to monitor or hopefully just curb some of the behaviors down there. And some of those things are also in the capital budget for coming up, so hopefully we can get them covered through CPA instead.
Cameras. Okay, so I know that when we talked about cameras, and we got the grant for the cameras in the harbors, there were provisions for blocking out residences. So I'm assuming that you're also going to get some public discussion around that before we drop those in place?
We definitely are. I've already heard a little bit of it, oh, so the police can sit there and watch the girls and
Yeah.
do bikinis all day. If they wanted to do that, they would actually be at the beach. Would be nice too. But I was thinking possibly at first of just having them on when there's not staff on duty, when we don't have safety staff down there. But of course, I'm afraid what comes with that is something does happen, and we say, so we had cameras, but we didn't have them on when something happened. So that might be worse. So I don't know.
Where would they be? I mean, where are you all thinking?
I'm thinking about on top of the light pole in the middle of the circle, and if there was a second, it would be over by the parking lot.
I was gonna say, to get the parking lot building.
Right.
Right.
And out towards the beach.
Yeah. Back to the coastline. Right. Right.
So before you pull the trigger on that, I'm assuming you'll come back with a policy wrapped around it.
I think it would help tremendously with lost children.
Right. Yeah, I think that people would be surprised to find out how often.
That's right, how many times they use their safety protocol and start looking for a child. It's used quite often.
It really is.
Yeah, I think you
Oh, yeah, I would say almost once a week for a lost child.
Sometimes
Sometimes
would be
it's
very helpful.
5 seconds, sometimes it's 20
Sometimes
minutes.
it's 20 minutes. I don't know.
Longest 20 minutes when you're that mother.
Yeah. People
Parents.
helping to look, yeah.
Yeah. You're really right, really everybody is helping. Any other questions?
You talked about more collaboration with the community center. And I saw a note about possible duplicative efforts. What sort of things are you thinking about there?
We'll talk about maybe some of the events that they already have that they could use help on. More people, more activities. They're thinking about combining their Pumpkin Fest with their Wobbling Goblin next year, making that just one October event, and it would involve Parks and Rec more. We talked talking about doing a spring event, something similar to when we did something more, family oriented at Masconomo, and they've talked about how they're just not really sure the direction right now. So, using the building and things like that. So this is kind of as the start to see what else we can do.
Okay.
That'd be great because it would provide space, an additional space option too for some of the classes that are on the seasonal programming list. And
Right. And during school construction, we have less space there going on.
Skateboard park, you guys have had some discussions at PNR meetings. Have those been attended at all by members of the public?
Not yet, no.
Anticipating that? Going to be reaching out a little bit, maybe, probably?
Yes, because I've been keeping a list. 'Cause a few kids have come in to ask about the skate park, and I've also had a big handful of adults that have been coming in to talk about pickleball courts. So,
Yeah.
and normally we're all about the kids, and I'm still all about the kids, but we also at the same time have someone that's been asking about a pump track for bikes.
Yep.
So I'm hoping maybe we can get some sort of pump track going somewhere that would kind of help take care of that part. 'Cause all the kids at the skate park, when I asked them what they did there,
Yeah.
they all ride their bikes, which is really not what you're supposed to do in there anyways. It was not safe, was not. So I'm hoping we can maybe provide something for bikes for them somewhere else more natural.
Did somebody talk about what Burnside is maybe being available for that, at least in the short term? Or is that not something that was discussed?
Of course, it's been discussed as one of the places, but then we also had Sue Brown at our meeting a couple weeks ago, and we talked about, she's been talking about this triangle of land on Forest Street and Summer Street.
Yeah.
And it's not really enough land that you could have a parking lot or a ball field or a soccer field or anything like that, but that could potentially also be a spot for the bike track.
Really?
because that's deeded recreation.
Right, and people most likely wouldn't be driving to the bike track like they would be to the soccer field for practice.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about that. So that's a potential spot.
Okay. Introduce yourself.
So opportunities for
Excuse
doing,
me, say your
can you introduce yourself?
Dina
and your
Gosnell, 2 Forster Road. In terms of opportunities for using bikes in sort of a, what, I don't know what you call it, when you're riding up and down through woods and things like that, that exists already at Gordon. There are many bike trails there through the woods and stuff like that. And people use it regularly and they come down Pine Street. So maybe just telling the people who want to do that, and it's not overly used because I walk there a lot, that is a place that they can go, and I believe that's Manchester Land, that first part up to Gold Pond, which
It
is where
is.
all the trails are. And then on the other side, you can either bike between the highway and the trail going to Gold, or I also see them biking on the trails that are on the other side of the path that go up towards Wyndham and Hamilton, and that's used commonly, by a lot of people.
I will say the one thing that was being talked about was something specific called pump track, which is a shaped track which is designed to allow a little bit of acrobatic or a little bit more high performance biking that maybe the trails wouldn't be really suitable for.
Mainly from walking my dog, because I run into, all these opportunities. And the other place is in Gloucester, and it's between the road that goes to Windsheet and the road, the exit before it. That is all bike trail, and they actually have, if you want to get really risky, ledges that you jump off of on your bike and then ride through the woods and things like that. In a thoroughfare that I think it's trustees of the reservation or either Essex Hotel who owns it.
Great, thank you. I know the boy who's come to our meeting, he's interested in something in Manchester, possibly, and more for a little bit of a younger age group, maybe like 9 to 15. I mean, anyone would be welcome, but that seems to be the age. And they probably do mountain bike too, but I think that's like a separate biking activity. You know what I mean? Just another one. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. That it for your update? Alrighty, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sounds good.
All right. So, let's move on to the master
Plan.
planning update.
No.
Do we want to find Steve Brown if she's here and bring her back in?
It's on planning board meeting.
In the planning
On
board.
that planning board meeting. There you go.
So, with 2 of our board members out, I think we're going to be doing round 1 and round 2 of this. So maybe we don't need to run into quite all of the nitty-gritty details. Why don't you do a skim through of your update, and then we can drill in on any questions that we might have. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, absolutely. Especially considering that I don't know what Susan had prepared for tonight.
Oh, okay.
I was just coming for moral support. So for the record, Gary Russell, co-chair of the Master Plan Committee. I can tell you where we're at briefly and what's coming up next, and then I'll answer questions that I can answer. So where we're at is we're in the final stages of the final draft document. And I'm not sure, I know it's been distributed to you, but I'm not sure what revision you had. I think the latest one was a September 19th document, maybe. Yes, so we have a more final draft of that. That's what we called the pretty draft, where we had someone help us with the graphics so we could get a sense of what the actual final document would look like. We're still working on finessing the contents. We haven't had any significant shifts or changes in the content since that version that you have. Primarily what's been happening is adding detail and looking at financials and cost. So that's something that, yes, so the implementation matrix is the supplemental piece of it. And that's something that Greg has helped with, FinCom has helped with. What we've done is we took the vision, we translated the vision into the master plan document with recommendations. That's the way that the story is organized through how the vision was laid out. But then we've created the implementation matrix to actually say, okay, so you have these recommendations, but how does that actually translate into reality? What does that mean you're going to try to do? How much will it cost? Is it funded? If not, how might we fund it? And that's been a really big part of the work that the committee and boards and committees have been helping us with. And I think we're in a pretty good place with getting as many financial numbers as we can on that. So I'm not sure what, you have to check with Sue. I'm sure Sue will get back to you with what the latest versions of documents are that you should be reviewing. And then what we plan to do is, you folks are going to talk about the master plan with the FinCom committee also. So a joint discussion, and that's scheduled for the 14th, I believe. That's what my note
That was
says.
a proposal.
And then, if you don't know about this, we're also proposing a working session on November 17th. That's a Saturday. We'll do it here in this room, probably morning, 8:30-ish, something. Just a casual working session for boards and committees. Of course, it'll be posted and open to the public if they want to come. But it's literally where we want to sit down and just go through the document, answer questions, concerns, because this has been a long process. This has been many years of working with the public and consultants and boards and committees. And we still have some people that are just now coming into it and asking questions like, well, where did this come from? I've never heard of this, or how do you think you're going to do that? So we're going to try to answer as many of those questions as possible. And our hope is that after we get through that working session, we can address any of those missing pieces and just put a stamp on our final document. And then we're going to present it to the public at a forum that's scheduled for December 5th at the high school.
At
And,
what time?
We don't have that set, but typically we've done it at 5:30 or 6. It's up for discussion. It may have to do with if there are other events scheduled that night. So time to be determined.
Okay.
End of day, early evening. And for this forum, it will be different because it will be more of a final presentation, an open house. We are working on the materials so that we'll have a series of posters that present information aligned with how the master plan document is laid out as a story. We're going to ask members of all the boards and committees and department staff that will be there to man the poster stations and answer questions about the pieces of the plan that they will be responsible for. So, for instance, as an example, you folks will take on ownership of the governance piece and many of those recommendations about governance in town. So we'll be asking at least some of you to be there to answer questions and take ownership of what that means going forward. So it's different in that it's not a question and answer session presentation. It's not one of these workshop exercises with green dots and red dots. It's like, this is it. We will take your comments and feedback, of course, but we're very confident that we've had a lot of public input and direct interaction, so we want to move forward. So that's our plan for where we're at now, how to finalize this thing, take it out to the public, and I'm happy to answer the questions that I can if you have them.
So,
So everyone did get the latest version of the implementation. And I think Susan was hoping that people provide some comments on that if they've had a chance to look through a lot of information there.
Yeah, it's, the
So-
matrix is fairly dense. I would suggest that if you haven't actually looked at the master plan at all yet, or if you've only skimmed it, I would start with the story first.
Yeah.
That gives you kind of the outline of the vision and how we got to the major recommendations. And then the matrix is much more of kind of the meat. And some of the meat doesn't make sense if you just read it dry without understanding the context.
So the one comment that I really had about the implementation matrix is it's supposed to show scheduling and priorities. And from a standpoint of visualizing and understanding where the financial hard points fall, the way the matrix is set up is hard to obtain that data. So it would be nice if maybe there was something additional to that, or if there was another presentation that could show us the waterfall dates.
We were just talking today. We understand that the matrix is hard to. You kind of go blind very quickly when you look at it. So we're looking at either reformatting it, finessing the format so it's more clearly read, or coming up with a different type of summary to get that information across.
Some spreadsheet form which shows the timeline. I can virtually guarantee you that FinCom is going to want to have that type of data to crunch on, because otherwise it's very difficult to make projections. I know that we have, a belief that we can fit this thing into our capital process over the next several years, but it's a belief, and we need to be able to see it and make projections. We typically do that with spreadsheets.
Okay. I will take that comment back.
Yeah. And then, I guess that was my major comment. And so I guess the word priority was used in a couple of little notes here. The implementation matrix doesn't, I don't think it really expresses priority very much. It basically says we're going to be doing all of these things. I guess these are all the things that had priority in the master plan that we expect to do, right?
Yeah, so I think it's a little misleading for us to present it as a list of priorities. It's really not, because it's not listed in order of this is most urgent. It's not prioritized in the list that way. You are correct in that these were identified as priorities in general through the community process. So these items were all recommendations that floated to the top, but we didn't get to the part with our community process of saying, do this project first, this project second. I think a lot of that needs to fall out through the budgeting process and through the implementation. And that's partly why there's so much dry information in that table, is that it's more of a menu list.
Yep.
And if we can, the biggest question we had with trying to get people to talk about priority in terms of first, second, or third is people would almost automatically say, well, I don't know, because how much is it going to cost? How long will it take?
Right.
And we didn't have that information. And for a lot of the stuff, we still don't have hard information. So I think much of that real priority 1, 2, 3 is going to happen as we go through budgeting.
Budget. So the dates that are in here, are those dates that are rough placeholder dates, or how were those dates developed?
How were they developed?
Okay.
They were developed as our best guess
Right.
of a timeline based on projects we've already watched go through the process.
Okay.
We didn't sit down on a line-by-line item and say, let's visualize how long this would take to complete.
Okay.
Right.
So then I guess given that, I would say the one other piece of information that would be very useful is if there are projects or items in here that clearly have dependencies. So one has to be a precursor.
Yep.
It would be important and really useful to know which ones are so related.
Yeah, I will just say that in many ways, this master plan is different than most because when we put together this matrix and we're trying to put the numbers to it, that stuff usually does happen after the master plan has been accepted, and that is usually the first step of implementation. So we just kind of kept working as far as we could go.
All right, comments and thoughts and questions?
Yeah, one of mine was regarding improved land use and development regulations, and it says this is 2024-25. And reading this as well as the pretty picture book. It's interesting. How do both the planning board and ZBA feel about those? I'm just curious.
I think they're ready to take on a fresh look at the zoning.
And the LCD specifically is really what I'm.
Well, specifically
But
the
they're-
LCD, but also in general, I think
Yeah.
they're ready to take a fresh look, at least at parts of it.
Okay.
There are certainly issues that have been coming up in town over the past few years where some clarification in the local zoning would help with decision making.
Mhm.
Would certainly help with the process flow.
Absolutely.
And they're aware of both boards by virtue of having a representative on the Affordable Housing Trust is now more aware that some of this needs to be reviewed and
Right.
possibly changed in order to have any shot at creating some of the necessary affordable housing. So they're more on board than a year ago.
We could run down the hallway and ask her.
No, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Good, thank you.
Any other items on the implementation matrix? Can I ask about the LCD zoning report? Is that something you have eyes on?
No, I haven't reviewed in detail the latest version that you're looking at.
Okay, so the one,
I am not confident in saying that I can review that with you.
that's fine, you don't need
Got it.
to. Actually, I
Bring
just
that
want
up
to
for you.
provide
Is
some
that-
feedback and in advance to see if it's been discussed or maybe have it more discussed before it comes back to us again. That is, so one of the threads of discussion about the LCD is potentially allowing, it's in our big meeting packet.
Yeah, that's the one I was
This one,
thinking,
yeah.
yeah.
Is potentially allowing some more development up there, but doing so in such a way that it also retains our strong water supply, isn't so impactful on our water resources, our watershed. And I know that is discussed as a desire, but I'm not yet seeing how it would be knit through the zoning uses, how it would be implemented, or could be.
Okay.
And I'm not expecting you to answer that now. I'm just saying that I know that I would like to hear, as we push down this line of thinking of allowing more development up there, how are we also going to tend to our watershed needs?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So first of all, the clarification, the LCD zoning report was not created by the master plan committee ourselves. That was a project, and we did have some input and feedback to this, but it was a project where a planning intern worked on this as a separate project, and that's why I don't feel comfortable representing
Yep.
it. But it did follow many of the principles that we talked about in the master planning process about if something happened in the LCD, how would that come about? And protecting the environment and the watershed was always one of the top priorities for people to make certain that that was up there in order to consider development. We all know the history of what's been proposed up there and how it's failed multiple times. We know the challenges of septic and services. So the one way that we can do this is that we have to define a low impact or zero impact development set of guidelines. So you have to have performance standards for any type of development before it can go in there. And that's that would be very specific the reality of how that came out, what that means would be specific to what type of development was proposed. So that is another piece of why in the LCD, talking about the zoning process and how we might change that, is that we might look at a different model of how we plan projects in that area rather than simply giving the zoning guidelines and just having developers right through there. We'll have a more upfront and proactive approach with the developer that might be interested, and we can work through those requirements up front rather than try to fit them in, try to have the developer fit them in and then have us reject them.
Well, as you said, it's the collaborative, I mean, in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are quite a few technologies that can really help us protect the water resources, and it's working with developers that are willing to see that there's value to them in doing that as well. So can't get any more specific than that. But
Oh, that's okay.
It can be done.
All right, so, and presumably that's all guidance that would arrive at the planning board and the zoning board for their development of.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, before we could ever break ground on anything up there, there's a whole lot more work that we have to do with the planning board, zoning, and working with any specific developer that might propose something. It's a long road before something would be built.
Okay. All right, Greg, is there anything else on this that we should run through tonight?
No, I think what you've done is fine. I think we need to think about sort of next phases of it in terms of having you gain comfort or critique what's here. So I don't know if that will be possible on the 14th in a joint meeting with the FinCom. Or do you want to put it on the agenda for the 19th as well?
I would think so.
No,
Yeah.
we're allotting an hour for an agenda before we,
Right,
right, that's,
it's going to be tight.
gonna be
on
there's an awful lot we
backwards.
seem to be putting on the 19th
Yeah.
already, so I would,
Oh, on the 19th already?
I mean, I just think the 19th will be a busy evening.
It will be, so the second half is scheduled to be
right.
with
Yep.
Essex.
Yep. So the FinCom meets on the 14th?
Right.
How much is this impacting this year's budget schedule?
Not a lot, I think that 40,000 figure is the one.
So we have some freedom to push this out and decide the amount.
Yeah, I think it's their desire to try to get,
Yeah,
they're looking to wrap it up.
We're tired.
Yeah, I got it.
exactly.
Especially if we're having that
So
presentation meeting.
they're aiming for the 5th to really be wrapped up and presenting it with a bow
Yeah.
in December.
Well,
I think we should be meeting with the finance group on the 14th.
yep, certainly, we should be meeting there and see if we can get it done. Yep.
From our end, I'll get back with Sue and Susan when she's feeling better, and we'll see what we can do to clarify some of these issues so that it will make your discussion easier.
Yep.
Thank you for jumping in.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Much
Sue.
appreciated.
Good pinch hitting.
As well as moral support.
Well said. And then some.
Yeah.
Thanks, good.
All right, let's see if we can rip through some of this stuff. All right, moving on to item number 5, the consent agenda. I have 3 items on the consent agenda. One is the minutes from October 1st and 22nd. We're down 2 members, so I'm going to pull those out. We'll take them another day. One is the appointment of Sean Daly as the Park and Rec representative of the CPC. And the other one is the HDC new fee schedule. And I'm going to pull out the HDC new fee schedule, and we can have some comments about it if we want, but I don't think we should vote on it tonight since both Susan and Arthur are not here. Thank God, I really was going to forget his name for the minute there. It was really terribly embarrassing.
You want a motion on the appointment?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to appoint Sean Daly to the as the Parks and Rec representative to the CPC. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. HDC new fee schedule, any comments on that? Need to be handed back tonight?
Good to vote on it, so we're gonna wait and just wait.
Yep, we're gonna wait. Yeah, I think that's right. I had one comment on it, but I'll take it offline with you. A question about it, actually. I'll take it offline later. Okay. Correspondence, Mass DOT letter dated 10/23/18 regarding Chapter 90 funding. Good news. We hit the community chest card that gives us an extra 28,365. I don't think so. 28,365.
Reverse the numbers.
Yep. For road work, so we can fix more of our roads this year. And now on to the town administrator's report.
Okay, we are still waiting for the new tables for here. They were back ordered, but I think you're shaking your head, so maybe you haven't heard an update. Okay. Hopefully in a couple weeks. And then this table will go into the other meeting. And we'll take out those other tables and find a new home for them. So for my evaluation, I think we're targeting possibility of meeting earlier on the 14th. I didn't know if that was an option for people or not.
What's early?
So FinCom will meet at 7, I believe. I didn't know if we, yes, if we met at 6, I don't know if that's an option for people.
Yep, for me, it is
I can do that.
about 4. Arthur.
Yeah, I'm sitting down with the two of them tomorrow, so assuming Susan's able to meet. So we'll stay tuned, but tentatively we'll try to do it then.
Okay.
And then there was a question about, depending on the outcome of tomorrow's vote regarding the school. So Essex is moving ahead with a special meeting Wednesday morning. It's posted if needed. So if the vote were to fail at the ballot tomorrow, they were going to proceed to announce a special election or second bite at the apple. So I didn't know if you wanted that kind of contingent plan B.
Yes. Well, I think a better way to say it, kind of forced into, if it doesn't pass, meeting sooner versus later to align with and make our determinations along with Essex.
You don't have to, there's no requirement to do
Well,
that.
I know.
No, I understand what you're saying.
If one town's already,
Right.
like line a plan out soon or quickly after the vote, then we need to at least be talking about it
We've had
as
discussion.
quickly.
We've had discussion in the past of raising it in the spring.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
Well, I would think it would need to be discussed with the full board again to be sure that everybody's still
Still
feeling
on
that
that
same
page.
way. Because that discussion was a while ago.
Well, we can,
I mean, I'm just saying, if Essex
I
is already
understand.
posted, it probably makes sense.
to post defensively. We can
Post
always
for Thursday.
post.
Yeah, post for Wednesday close for Thursday.
Right.
And everybody has a chance to take a breath, if anybody has to meet. Figure it out.
6:30. 6:30?
Yeah, I mean, we have two other members, so we don't know whether morning's easier than evening. I have no idea what that does
Same
for
place for
Arthur.
the-
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the impact of the morning is on Arthur, or, I mean, I don't know, but I guess I'm looking at this, if it's considered an emergency meeting, then we should probably make sure we have quorum.
Right.
That's all. It's hard.
How you characterize
So-
it.
I don't know, Eli, that's why I'm asking the question.
Oh,
My
so-
question is, what information are we gonna have on Thursday that's gonna, I mean, this is.
So if it passes tomorrow,
It's on you.
the meeting's
It's on you.
canceled.
Right.
If it fails tomorrow, then you meet and have a discussion about what you think is the best next step.
I mean, would we be waiting for the school district to weigh in as well? If
Right,
there
that's
needed to be another step?
But, yeah, my own bias is this,
Right.
this is too quick.
Well, that's, I was,
Um,
I was surprised by that.
Yes. Yes, I think everyone needs to take a breath if that happens.
Mhm.
I don't know how we're gonna be able to do anything effective. We're gonna be able to talk about it, but that's about it. I don't necessarily see the need to burn a time slot.
We'll wait until Wednesday morning and see what we need to do. And then we need to post a meeting, we could do it for the following
You
week.
can do it next week.
Right.
You can do it next- You don't want to wait too much long
Well, right,
if
right,
you want to do it in December, but,
right.
um,
All right.
Just the three of us sitting there say we could wait, not post anything, and if we need to figure that out, we can figure it out on Wednesday.
but
Propose something for
you can meet at noon on Friday. if you
Right,
wanted to.
right.
So, okay. All right. Speaking of Essex, so they are scheduled, the selectmen from Essex are scheduled to join you on the 19th at 7:30 for a joint meeting. And the topic is shared services, to begin a discussion on the possibility of what possibilities might exist for us to start exploring shared services. So again, if you have thoughts on how best to structure that, I'd love to hear from you. We have obviously a couple of weeks to plan for that. But if you have some thoughts, please let me know. And I'll be working with Susan on that.
That's great.
And then just a quick update, progress on the FY20 budget is good. We're meeting with department heads and the liaisons, and I'll be putting together that preliminary budget by the end of this month for presentation to you and the FinCom on December 3rd, which is your regular meeting in December. And then one new thing that came up, I didn't make it in my memo, the backup ambulance was declared non-functional by the state today.
Why?
It has some significant rust on the rocker panels.
Was this like part of an annual state
Yes.
inspection?
How
Um,
old is it, do you know?
18 years.
So,
So there was debate about replacing it in this year's budget. It was originally scheduled for next year. So I don't have an estimate on what it costs to make it functional, and it may not be worth putting money into it. We may need to go to a plan B, whether that be renting or just relying on private for the second backup or mutual aid of some sort. So we'll stay tuned. I don't have those answers yet for you, but just in case you heard about it. We are down to one ambulance right now.
That is an ALS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, yeah, that's a little dramatic, I suppose. Right. Yep, yeah. So it's already, I think they already took it to the auto body shop for estimates.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an update on that as we hear from them.
I had a question on Central Street Pond there. If it's restored, meaning it gets smoked.
Yes,
Back to what it- Who owns the land in the pond? Does it become dry?
so I think,
Who the property line for the?
no, I actually think we own,
Because we already own those.
I think we already own it, the circumference of the pond.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
The
I'll have to double check that.
Even if the circumference,
Right.
that's mine.
I think those boundary lines basically are at the wall.
At the walls.
And the edge of the water, but I'll have to double check. I'm pretty sure that's the way it is.
Right.
Right. Yep. So we clearly own the wall, where the wall is, where the seawall is. The other side, there's no wall. I just have to double check that ownership. So that's all I need to do right now.
Okay. Any other items from anybody else? All righty. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Good night, folks.